How suspicious should I be when I'm traveling in Ukraine or different parts of the world when an attractive female walks up to me and shows any kind of attention? Is that like this kind of James Bond spy movie stuff, or is that kind of stuff used by intelligence agencies?
I don't think it's used. It's absolutely used. It's called sexpionage. That's the term that we jokingly call it, is sexpionage.
Yeah.
But yeah, the art of attraction, appeal, the manifestation of feelings through sexual manipulation, all of that is a super powerful tool. The Chinese use it extremely well. The Russians use it extremely well. In the United States, we actively train our officers not to use it because in the end, it leads to complications in how you professionally run a case. So we train our officers not to use it. However, you can't control what other people think. So if you're an attractive male or an attractive female officer and you're trying to talk to an older general who just happens to be gay or happens to be straight and is attracted to you, of course they're going to be that much more willing to talk to an American who is also attractive. So it's hard to walk that back
in all definitions. So it could be all elements of charisma. That's attractiveness in a dynamic sense of the word. So it's visual attractiveness,
Yep.
but the smile, the humor, the wit, the flirting, all that kind of stuff that could be used to
Correct.
to the art of conversation.
There's also elements of sexuality that people underestimate, right? So physical sexuality, physical attraction is the most obvious one. It's the one that everybody talks about and thinks about. But then there's also sapiosexuality, which is being sexually attracted to thoughts, to intelligence. And then you got all the various varieties of personal preferences. Some people like people of a certain color skin, or they like big noses, they like small noses, they like big butts, they like small butts, they like tall guys, they like bald guys, whatever it might be. You can't ever predict what someone's preferences, sexual arousal preferences are going to be. So then you end up walking into a situation where then you discover, and just imagine being an unattractive, overweight, married guy, and you're walking into an asset or a target meeting with like a middle-aged female who is also not very attractive and also married. But then it turns out that person is a sapiosexual and gets extremely turned on by intelligent conversation. That's exactly what you're there to do. Your mission is to have intelligent conversation with this person to find out if they have access to secrets. And by virtue of you carrying out your mission, they become extremely aroused and attracted to you. That is a very complicated situation.
It's hard to know who to trust. Like, how do you know your wife, or how does your wife know that you're not a double agent from Russia?
There's a large element of experience and time that goes into that. She's also trained, and I think my wife and I also
think.
Yeah, my wife and I also have the benefit of being recruited young and together, where
so over time you can start to figure out things that are very difficult to so you form the baseline, you start to understand the person, it becomes very difficult to lie.
The most difficult thing in the world is consistency. It's the most difficult thing in the world. Some people say that discipline or self-discipline, what they're really talking about is consistency. When you have someone who performs consistently over long periods of time under various levels of stress, you have high confidence that is the person that you can trust. You can trust them to behave within a certain pattern. You can trust an asshole to be an asshole without trusting the asshole to take care of your kids, right? So I don't ever want to mix up the idea of personal trust versus trusting the outcome. You can always trust a person to operate within their pattern of behavior. It just takes time for you to get consistent feedback as to what that baseline is for them.
To form a good model, predictive model of what their behavior is going to be like.
Right. And what's fascinating is I think the challenge is building that model quickly. So technology is one of those tools that will be able in the future to very quickly create a model of behavior, because technology can pull in multiple data points in a very short period of time that the human brain simply can't pull in at the same speed.
Well, that's actually what I did my PhD on. That's what I did at Google, is forming a good representation, unique representation across the entire world based on the behavior of the person. The specific task there is so that you don't have to type in the password. The idea was to replace the password.
Right.
But it also allows you to actually study human behavior and to think, all right, what is the unique representation of a person? How, because we have very specific patterns,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of humans are very similar in those patterns. What are the unique identifiers within those patterns of behavior? And I think that's, from a psychology perspective, a super fascinating question. And from a machine learning perspective, it's something that you can, as the systems get better and better and better, and as we get more and more digital data about each individual, you start to be able to do that kind of thing effectively.
And it's, I mean, when I think of the fact that you could create a dossier on somebody in a matter of 24 or 48 hours, if you could wire them for 2 days, right? Internet of Things style, you put it in their underwear or whatever, right? Some chip that just reads everything. How heavy are they walking? How much time do they sleep? How many times do they open the refrigerator? When they log into their computer, how do they do it? Like, which hand do they use when they log in? What's their most common swipe? What's their most visited website? You could collect an enormous amount of normative data in a short period of time, where otherwise we're stuck the way that we do it now. Once or twice a week, we go out for a coffee for 2 hours. And 2 hours at a time over the course of 6, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, you're coming up with a 50% assessment on how you think this person is going to behave.
Mm-hmm.
Just that time savings is immense.
Something you've also spoken about is private intelligence and the power and the reach and the scale and the importance of private intelligence versus government intelligence. Can you elaborate on the role of what is private intelligence and what's the role of private intelligence in the scope of all the intelligence that is gathered and used in the United States?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that so few people know about, and it became a more mainstream topic with the Trump administration, because Trump made it no secret that he was going to hire private intelligence organizations to run his intelligence operations and fund them. So that really brought it to the mainstream. But going all the way back to 9/11, going all the way back to 2001, when the 9/11 attacks happened, there was a commission that was formed to determine the reasons that 9/11 happened. And among the lists that they determined, of course, they found out that the intelligence community wasn't coordinating well with each other. There were fiefdoms and there was infighting and there wasn't good intel sharing. But more than that, they identified that we were operating at Cold War levels, even though we were living in a time when terrorism was the new biggest threat to national security. So the big recommendation coming out of the 9/11 Commission was that the intelligence organizations, the intelligence community, significantly increase the presence of intelligence operators overseas and in terms of analytical capacity here in the United States. When they made that decision, it completely destroyed, it totally was incongruent with the existing hiring process, because the existing hiring process for CIA or NSA is a 6 to 9 month process. The only way they could plus up their sizes fast enough was to bypass their own hiring and instead go direct to private organizations. So naturally, the government contracted with the companies that they already had secure contracts with: Boeing, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, CACI, you name it. And then over time, from 2001 to now, or I guess that started really in 2004 when they started significantly increasing the presence of private intelligence officers. From then until now, it's become a budgetary thing. It's become a continuity of operations thing. And now the reason Northern Virginia has become one of the wealthiest zip codes in America is because of the incredible concentration of private intelligence that is supporting CIA, NSA, DIA, FBI, and all the slew of IC partners.
By the way, does Palantir play a role in this?
Palantir is one of those organizations that was trying to pitch their product to an intelligence community, because it's a fantastic product on paper. But the challenge was the proprietary services, the proprietary systems that we used in CIA prior to Palantir continued to outperform Palantir. So just like any other business decision, if you've got homegrown systems that outperform external systems, then it's not worth it to share the internal information.
Got it. So what the close connection between Peter Thiel and Donald Trump, did that have a role to play in the um, in Donald Trump's leveraging of private intelligence, or is that completely disjoint?
I think that they're related, but only circumstantially. Because remember, Donald Trump wasn't really investing in CIA. If you haven't discovered your natural born spy skills, then somebody else might be using theirs against you. CIA teaches us that there are only 3 types of people in the world: those who motivate, those who manipulate, and those who are being controlled by one of the other 2. I created a 3-minute CIA-style quiz to help you unlock your secret psychological advantage and identify your hidden blind spot. This test was developed to help you weaponize your natural born gifts and use them to get ahead of 99% of people in power, wealth, and purpose. It was also designed to make sure that you can protect yourself against those who would use their skills against you. All you have to do is click on the first link in the description below or scan the QR code on your screen to start your spy quiz now. I want you to discover your secret spy superpower and use it for good before somebody else uses their power against you. So the last thing he wanted to do was spend his network, wasta. Wasta is a term that we call influence. It's an Arabic term for influence. Trump didn't want to use his wasta putting Thiel into CIA, only to lose Thiel's contract as soon as Trump left office. So instead, it was more valuable to put Peter Thiel's tool to use in private intelligence. And then, of course, I think he nominated Peter Thiel to be his Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State. At some point in time, he tried to presidentially appoint Peter Thiel into a position of government authority.
What do you think of figures like Peter Thiel? Do they wield, and I'm sure there's figures of similar scale and reach and power in private intelligence. What do you think about their role and power in this whole, like, without public accountability?
Yes.
That you would think directors of CIA perhaps have.
So this is where private intelligence has both a strength and a weakness. The ultimate law overriding that's overseeing private intelligence is not government legislation. It's the law of economics. If they produce a superior product, then they will have a buyer. If they do not produce a superior product, they will not have a buyer. And that's a very simple business principle. Whereas in the current national security infrastructure, you can create a crap product, but the taxpayer dollars are always going to be spent. So it's really thrown things for a loop, especially during the Trump administration. And this is one of the things that I will always say I liked about the Trump administration. It put a big, blazing, bright light on all of the flaws within our system. One of those flaws being this executive power over the intelligence organizations and the lack of accountability for intelligence organizations to produce a superior product. When that light got shone down, that's when you also saw Trump start to go after, if you remember, there was a period where he was taking security clearances away from retiring officers. That became a big, hot issue. That became something that people were very opposed to when they didn't realize that process of taking security clearances away, that incentivized seasoned senior officers to stay in service. Because with private intelligence paying a premium during the Trump administration, because Trump was paying a premium to the private intelligence world, when senior officers found that it was more profitable to retire early, keep their clearance, and go work for Raytheon, Trump saw that as bypassing service to the American people. You've made a career in CIA, you've made a career in NSA, you should stay there. If you leave, you lose your clearance because you no longer have a need to know. He upset the apple cart with that. And unfortunately, the narrative that came out in many ways was a negative narrative against Trump, when in fact, he was actually doing quite a service to the American people, trying to take away the incentive of senior officials leaving their service in order to just profiteer in the private intelligence world.
So in that way, he was kind of supporting the CIA in making sure that competent people and experienced people stay in CIA, are incentivized to stay there.
Correct. I think that there was definitely, he understood incentives. I mean, Donald Trump understands incentives. So he was trying to incentivize them to stay, but I think he was also playing a safety card because he didn't want former CIA officials who were not listening to him to then move into private intel organizations that he may be hiring, only to then have them undermine him from both sides of the coin. So there was a little bit of offensive calculation in there as well.
But do the dynamics and the incentives of economics that you referred to that the private intelligence operates under, is that more or less ethical than the forces that maybe government agencies operate under? Like, what's your intuition? Is capitalism lead? So you mentioned it leads to maximizations of efficiency and performance, but is that correlated with ethical behavior when we're talking about such hairy activities like collection of intelligence?
The question of ethics is a great question. So let me start this whole thing out by saying CIA hires people on a spectrum of our ability to be morally flexible, ethically flexible. All people at their heart are ethically flexible. I would never punch somebody in the face, right? Some people out there would say, I would never hurt another human being. But as soon as a human being posed a direct threat to their daughter or their son or their mother, now all of a sudden they're going to change their ethical stance in self-defense, right? But at the end of the day, it's still hurting another person. So what CIA looks for is people who are able to swing across that spectrum for lesser offenses, right? More flexibility. I do not believe that private intelligence and the laws of economics lend themselves to increased ethics or increased ethical behavior in the short term. But what ends up happening is that in the long term, in order to scale economic benefits, you are forced to act within norms of your customer base. So as the norms of that customer base dictate certain requirements, the company has to adapt to those requirements in order to continue to scale. So if a company tries to ostracize LGBTQ, or if they try to ostracize men or ostracize women, they're limiting their ability to grow economically. They have to adapt to whatever is the prevailing ethical requirement of their customer base.
If you need to sort of seduce someone or charm someone on the spot, are there any sort of techniques that they teach you?
Absolutely. There's, when you really, like we were talking about, when you really think about charm and seduction alike are both an emotional connection.
Yeah. So
I don't want you to think of it in terms of a sexual connection. Sexual connections are real and sometimes those exist. But I would venture to say that the average person has really only had maybe 2 or 3 moments in their entire life where they connected with somebody immediately sexually. But we've had hundreds of interactions where we've connected with people emotionally. And those people go on to become friends, or they go on to become boyfriends or girlfriends, or they go on to become, you name it, right? Yeah. Colleagues, partners in businesses. Yeah. Emotional connections are so much more common and so much more easy to create artificially than sexual connections. To actually find 2 people who are so incredibly sexually dynamic at the same time in the same place, that is a hard thing to do. So when it comes to seduction, when CIA trains us to seduce, when they train us to connect, it's not necessarily about the sex. It's never really centered around the sex. It's centered around the emotional connection.
And how do they do that?
You can learn someone's emotional state in the moment if you use assessment techniques, awareness techniques, body language, verbal intonation. There's a lot of skills that go into it. It's not difficult, but there are skills that go into it. So you can understand where they are standing. Are they coming from a place where they are angry at their core? Are they coming from a place where they are comfortable? Are they coming from a place where they feel threatened? And if you can connect on whatever those topics might be, then what ends up happening naturally is that person starts to feel like you and them are the same. And you need the target to feel that similarity, because it turns into something called trust, right? When they see in you that you are a reflection of their emotional state, they start to trust you because they subconsciously start to assume that you and them are going through the same emotional experience. This is why women who are breaking up oftentimes make friends with other women who are breaking up.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a moment where you're going through something difficult and then you meet somebody new and they're going through something difficult and you're like,
instant connection.
and you're so surprised. You're like, I can't believe I met you at this one moment of all the people to meet. You're the one I met. No. At any given moment, hundreds of people are going through all sorts of different emotions.
Yeah.
It's just that you aren't always going through the same emotion that they are.
Yeah.
Trained intelligence officers, we change our emotional state to match your emotional state.
How do you do that? Are there some practical techniques?
It's all fabrication. That's what we call artificial relationship building. So as an example, if you and I were having a conversation and I wanted to get you to believe that I was in the same emotional state as you, first, I would ask questions. I wouldn't tell stories. I wouldn't talk. I would ask you questions. Where are you going? How was your day? Tell me how you felt about this. Tell me how you felt about that. I would validate your feelings. So if you were to say, oh, it's kind of a shitty day, it's gray, and my energy's low, I would validate that and I would say, oh, I agree. On gray days, my energy is always low too. What do you do about it? And then you might answer, oh, I stay indoors, I watch movies, I drink coffee. What's your favorite coffee shop? Oh, I really like this coffee shop that's down the street. It's called whatever, the Barista Brothers. And it's in Borough Market in London. Oh, I've heard wonderful things about that place, right? What do you drink when you get there? What I'm doing here is I'm collecting information about you. I'm eliciting through open questions and closed questions. I'm eliciting you to give me information, but I'm not giving you any of my information. The only information I'm sharing about myself is a reflection of what you've already told me. You like that coffee shop? I like that coffee shop. You get tired in the gray? I get tired in the gray. But because of the elicitation, because of the way the conversation is being structured, it doesn't feel like I'm just agreeing with you.
And what is elicitation?
Elicitation is a process where you indirectly collect information about another person, meaning you know that you're collecting that information. You know that you are presenting questions in a way that will elicit a response, but the person that you're talking to doesn't know that's what you're doing. So in this interview, this is not elicitation.
Yeah.
You ask me questions, I answer your questions. During elicitation, you learn other things about a person. Would you like to do an elicitation exercise?
Yeah, sure.
So let's do an elicitation exercise. So we're going to have a conversation. I want you to know right now, and I want everybody watching and listening to know, this is not a real conversation.
Okay.
This is an elicitation conversation. So I'm telling you that because I want you to practice in your head, I can't trust this conversation.
Okay.
I need you to tell yourself, like, this isn't real, this isn't real, this isn't real. Because my job to elicit from you is to make it feel as real as possible.
Okay.
Okay, so the more comfortable that you are in the conversation, the more you will elicit. So I'm telling you this because I want you to try to resist.
Okay.
And I'm telling everybody watching this because they will be able to see your body language, your facial expressions, and they'll be able to see how much you're resisting or if you start to believe the conversation is real.
Okay. So I should resist giving you information?
No.
Okay.
I don't want you to resist giving me information.
Okay.
I want you to remember that this conversation we're about to have, it's going to feel like we're really friends.
Okay.
But we're not.
Okay.
I am trying to take information from you,
Yeah.
okay? All right. Francesca, how are you today?
I'm all right. Thank you. How are you?
I'm well. So we were talking before we came on camera about the fact that you go home often. How often do you go home?
Maybe once every 2 months.
And Romania is home.
Yeah, Romania.
Do you go back because there's work there, or is it just family?
It's just family and friends. Yeah, I like to visit them. I'm very close with my family.
Who are you closest with?
My parents and my brother.
Did you grow up close to your parents, or did it happen later in life?
It was on and off. Like, we were close, and then, teenage years, we kind of, as it happens, and then we became close once again, once I matured a bit.
So two things that's really interesting there, right? First, I was never really able to connect with my parents, so I didn't really grow up close to my parents. But as I got much older, right, as I got into my 40s, then I could really relate to my parents.
Oh.
And that maturity finally kicked in. How did you connect with your parents? How were you able to find that maturity so much younger than I was?
I guess because I was studying a lot of psychology and, I was working with therapists before for like a long time in my life. So, I kind of, I guess, accelerated that process.
Is your brother also close to your parents?
Yeah.
And you're close to your brother?
Yeah. Very
So
close.
I'm not very close to my sisters. We always grew up competitive. How did you become close to your brother?
I became close by kind of trying to find similarities between us. And also we went through a lot of hardships together. So that bonded us.
So it sounds like you did the majority of the work to try to make you close?
I mean, I think the hardships just happened and then we became close. But maybe because I'm the oldest, I put a bit more effort into the relationship. He's a bit more nonchalant.
And everybody else is still in Romania, or do they also
Well, my
travel
brother
back?
moved to Barcelona now, but yeah, we all kind of come in the same time.
And how does he like Barcelona?
He loves it.
Does he?
It's like the best city for him.
I've heard great things about it.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be very beautiful and artsy and architectural.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, he lives in a student accommodation with a rooftop pool and a cinema room and 10-minute walk from the beach. So he's having the best life.
Okay, so we'll stop this now.
Yeah.
How much did you find yourself struggling to remember that wasn't a real conversation?
Yeah, definitely. I had to keep reminding myself, like, wow, that's really interesting. We're connecting, but I had to remind myself, like, oh, this isn't real.
This isn't real. We're
Yeah.
not connecting.
Yeah.
I was there exclusively just to learn information about you.
Yeah.
So let me tell you what I elicited from you.
Yeah.
Because remember, I didn't ask these things directly, but this is what I learned
Yeah.
from you just talking.
Yeah.
Okay? Your brother's in college.
Yeah.
I didn't ask you if he was in college, but you told me he lives in student housing,
Yeah.
right? Also, he is in Barcelona, but he's from Romania.
Yeah.
So that tells me that somehow he can afford travel. And somehow he can afford that travel and schooling,
Yeah.
but he himself probably doesn't work or doesn't work very much. So that tells me that your parents have some kind of funding source. Your parents are paying for it, most likely.
Yeah.
You are the one in the family who is most likely the profile that is the family keeper, the person who keeps everyone connected, the sticky glue, because you go back. Your parents don't come here. It doesn't sound like very often. And your brother goes back. So and you are the one who is trying to be connected to him, and you are the one who is trying to be connected to your parents. So that tells me that you might be the one that's the most family oriented. Whether or not you are the most family oriented naturally, or whether that's something that came about because of your studying psychology. Now you feel guilty and you feel like you have to connect them. I don't know that yet, but I do feel like you are the person who's trying to keep everyone together. You're the one who was close to your parents and then distant and then close again. It also sounds like you're a very cerebral person, like you're a very objective more than subjective person. That's why what you studied became something that you then applied in your life.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about the hardships. I wanted to ask direct questions about what are these hardships,
Yeah.
but I didn't go into that. But what that tells me is that there's probably also been something that traumatized you and your brother because the two of you went through these hardships together.
Yeah.
And the reason that you talked about the hardships only between you and your brother and not you and your parents was possibly because the trauma that you suffered was from your parents.
Oh my God.
So how much of that elicitation assessment was correct?
Yeah, that was like very close to 100% accurate. That's really good.
And
Yeah.
that's what we learned how to do. And that's
That
what
was 5 minutes.
and that's what elicitation can do for you. And that's why we teach elicitation at
Yeah.
Everyday Spy, and we teach business owners and people
Yeah.
how to use it. And we teach single people, married people, older people, younger people, because it's so powerful. You can use that to win clients. You
Yeah.
can use it to make sure that the person that you're dating is truly who they say they are. You can use it to start a new relationship.
Yeah.
You can use it with your kids to build a stronger connection with your kids. Elicitation is a very valuable tool. But the original question that you asked was about seduction. true seduction starts there. True seduction starts with a conversation that is an elicitation conversation where we start to understand the values that the target experiences, what they care about, and then we replicate those values back. Because when you replicate values back, it subconsciously translates to, I can trust this person, which subconsciously translates to, I can trust this person with my body.
Super fascinating. And you're kind of having a read, on people as well, like you're reading people. Are there any other techniques you use to read people?
Body language is a great one. So if you go back to our elicitation exercise, and I'm going to encourage you to do this, and I'll encourage everybody listening and watching, and maybe in the edit, I want you to do this too.
Yeah.
When I was asking you questions, I was watching your body language, and there was a lot of smiling. There was a lot of open positioning with your body. Your arms were open. Your hand gestures were open.
Yeah.
You've been sitting with your legs crossed the entire time that we've been having the interview. So that's baseline.
Yeah.
This is probably just because it's comfortable for you.
Yeah.
It's not because you're feeling attacked or threatened. But most importantly, I was asking you these questions about your past, and you kept looking to your left. And you look to your left. For most people in a Western society, you speak English, obviously. I believe Romanian is read from left to right.
Yeah.
So when you're talking to somebody in a Western society, they read the same way that they see a chronology. They see a timeline.
Yeah.
When most of us, if I ask you to visualize your childhood, most people are going to think of their childhood on this side.
Left.
And then they grow in this direction because that's the same way that you read from left to right. So when you know that that's how people read, you can also trust that that is how they will view a chronology. So then when you ask them questions about time, when you ask them to remember their childhood, they should look to the left.
Yeah.
When you ask them to remember anything other than today, they should look to the left. When you ask them about the future, you should see their eyes look to the right. When you ask them to create something that isn't a memory, they should look to the right, right? So that's what I was doing with you during our elicitation. And you'll see that in the playback. You'll see how I ask you a question about childhood or about the past, and you look to the left. And that's how I know that you're being honest, but it's also how I can see that we are connecting.
Yeah.
Even though I told you don't connect with me,
Yeah.
I could still see.
I couldn't help it. Yeah. And what if someone is lying, for instance? Would that mean they're looking to the right?
Exactly right. So if, again, I'm specifically talking about a person who is based in a Western culture. Because if it's an Eastern culture where they read from right to left or they read from top to bottom, you have to adjust your expectations. You have to look for people looking up when they're thinking about their childhood.
Yeah.
Or if they read from right to left, you have to think about a culture where they look to the right. And you have to adjust yourself to the person. But since most people watching this are speaking English or they speak English, they're probably coming from the same background as you and I. So the brain has two hemispheres. It has a left quadrant or a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere. Your left hemisphere is your logical hemisphere.
Yeah.
Your right is your creative hemisphere. Well, what that means is when you're accessing the left side of your brain, when you're accessing the fact-based logical part of your brain, your eyes actually move in the same direction as that hemisphere. So if I ask you a math question, you'll probably look to your left to figure it out. You just did.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when I ask you to invent something new, you're going to look to your right, right? If I were to ask you to be like, hey, name your perfect man or describe your perfect man, you would probably look to the right and be like, he would have this and he would have that. Because you're tapping into that creative half of your brain. So that's another way that you can kind of start to understand how people work. Now, with all what I'm giving you are called micro expressions.
Yeah.
Micro expressions are not fully reliable until you understand the person's baseline. There are some people who naturally look left when they're being creative, and there are some people who naturally look right when they're being logical. So you can't, it's not a cheat sheet for all people.
Yeah.
But it helps you understand the person that you're talking to, and you can test them in advance. You can ask them truth-based questions.
Yeah.
You know, what's your middle name? Oh, my middle name is North. And then now if you know their middle name is North and they look to the right, that's giving you information like, oh, that's their truth quadrant. That's where they look when they're telling you the truth. How old are you? Oh, I turned 45 last year. They did it again. And you know they're 45. That's another indicator of truth.
Yeah.
So you might be dealing with somebody who's atypical, but still consistent.
So maybe give us like one or two techniques you were taught on that work really effective to really get somebody to let their guard down and start to trust you.
So one of the first things that we're taught is that nobody is as they appear to be. Everybody in every culture, every age, every education level, they're all pretending.
That is
And
so true.
they don't acknowledge that they're pretending, but they are pretending. So all people are made up of three lives. There's a public life, then there's a private life, and then there's a secret life. Your public life is the life that you present to the world.
That's your mask.
It's your mask. It's your hair. It's your clothes. It's your confidence. It's your worry. It's your favorite TV shows. It's the shit you talk about when you're not trying to talk about anything important. That's all public life. That's our safe haven. It's our space. It's our shell.
Sure.
We put that up so that we keep the wrong people out, and the right people we can keep at a distance until we deem them worthy of coming into our private life.
We keep our guard up. Right? Does that make sense? Everybody that's here, you're in sales, business, every prospect you talk to, they're going to have a mask. The guard is up. How do you get them to take that mask off, let the guard down? This is good.
The second life is called the private life. So once people get out of their public life, or they let you into their private life from their public life, that's where you start to see what people's vulnerabilities are, right? Your private life is like your family, your close family. They know that your feet stink. They know what your hair looks like when it's all messy. They know that, you get gas if you eat too much beef. They know secrets about you that your public life doesn't share.
Yeah.
But they still don't know your deepest secrets.
Yeah.
Right? So inside your private life, you have a small group of people, and there's power for the people in your private life. But when you really want to move someone, when you really want to influence and persuade someone, you have to get out of their private life and into their secret life. There's only a handful of people that we ever let into our secret life. Your secret life is where you are self-aware of your own biggest vulnerabilities. It's where you know you aren't as successful as you want to be, where you know you're a little bit abusive or a little bit manipulative or a little bit of a dick.
Sure.
It's where you know that you cheated on that girlfriend and nobody else knows. It's where you know that you sometimes think about cheating on your wife.
Sure.
All that happens in your secret life. And we all have a secret life.
Inner self.
So when you want to recruit a source and make them a highly productive, highly loyal source, you have to systematically go from their public life into their private life, into their secret life. Because once you're in someone's secret life, this is the magic of it all.
Yeah.
You're never allowed to leave.
Because there's that emotional connection.
Because it's so powerful. Even if you don't see them, to them, you're still one of their most closest confidants. 10 years go by, 20 years go by. It's the reason we almost all have that friend in college that, as I tell you this story, you're thinking of that friend.
Sure.
Where if they showed up tomorrow on your doorstep, it would be as if a day hasn't passed.
So how do you get that emotional connection where they willingly allow you to get into that inner self of themselves? Like, what are you saying? What are you asking? I mean, I know there's a lot that goes into that. It's not just one thing, but give us maybe an example of how that process works.
So we have a framework that we use. It's called sense making. And sense making is a 3-step framework that starts with avoidance.
Okay.
The first time you meet somebody, and in their public life, they will try to avoid you. It's true for all of us. The first time I meet a stranger, I try to avoid them too. It's a natural survival instinct.
Yeah.
After you push through the avoidance step, you get into this step we call competition. And competition is an exchanging of ideas and opinions. And then after you get through competition, you get into compliance. You have to get through the sense-making process before you can be accepted into the secret life.
Okay.
So just as a quick kind of example, you meet a new person. That new person doesn't trust you. Of course they don't trust you. They don't know you.
Sure.
Whether you're trying to sell something or whether you just run into them on the street, they don't care.
The guard's up.
Their guard is up, and you are firmly in their public life.
Yeah.
Well, if you engage through that public life, if you engage through the avoidance, they try to avoid you, you don't avoid them. They continue to try to avoid you, you continue to engage. What's going to happen is they're going to realize that you see something in them that nobody else sees. And then they're going to feel interesting. They're going to feel good because you're around them.
Okay.
And then they'll engage you. And then when they engage you, you have this opportunity to what we call develop and assess them.
Okay.
They're going to tell you information. You're going to tell them information. And you're going to compete in the information the same way that a team that's on the same school competes for scrimmages.
Sure.
Right? It's not someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. It's an exchange of ideas and information to build a relationship.
So do you try to align your ideas with their ideas, or you take their ideas and you somehow like align yours to like not necessarily be perfect to theirs, but like where it's somewhat similar, so they start to like pull in, or what do you mean?
So that whole competition phase is really two steps. The first step is you mirror and reflect their values, their beliefs, even their physical behaviors.
Okay.
Because what you're trying to do is get them to express more of their opinions, express more of their ideas. Sure. Because once you have that information, once that cat's out of the bag, it can't go back in.
Okay.
Once they admit that they have doubts about this other person, they can't just later on say, oh, I made a mistake. I actually really trust that person.
You're
completely.
more putting the focus on them rather than you. So you're probably getting them to talk most of the time, and you're more listening and navigating.
Exactly. Your job is open-ended questions that have a natural flow to the topics they're bringing up.
Does that make sense to everybody? What he just said, open-ended questions that have a natural flow, that don't sound scripted. Because if it sounds scripted, then the guard goes back up.
Guard goes back up.
Goes back up. See, it's sales. That's a big thing. Keep going. This is really good.
So you go through this first phase of mirroring and reflecting. And then when the body language starts to demonstrate that they are mirroring you, then you start to change your behaviors to get them to follow your lead.
You said something really brilliant here that most salespeople have never really heard. Most salespeople have been trained that you have to mirror the prospect. Did you hear what Andrew said? He's getting them to mirror him. Why is that so important, to not mirror everything the prospect does, but learn how to get the prospect to mirror what you're doing?
So the mirroring process is a tactical step. It's not a strategy, right? Strategies are long-term, tactics are short-term. You are mirroring and reflecting their values and their beliefs, not because you have them. You're mirroring and reflecting their body language, not because you feel the same way. You're doing it so that they see themselves in you. Yeah. And then once they see themselves in you, they project themselves onto you. And then they want to keep up with you. So you go from sitting forward like they're sitting forward to leaning back. And then if they lean back, that is an indicator that the power dynamic has shifted.
Yeah.
That now they are following you.
Yeah. So they're compliant to you now.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
And the final step is compliance. And what that compliance means, remember we started avoid, compete, comply. When they get to that compliance step, the stronger you have competed with them, the more information, data, and leverage you have to get them to comply in their best interest or even against their best interest. Yeah. Because they've essentially built a power dynamic where you are in the position of power. You are the one inside their secret life.
They view you, I don't want to say like as they trust you. They view you as somebody they can trust, like that's maybe even authority or something that they trust, they can feel like they can tell more of their inner stuff to.
Correct. And trust is such a good word, and people misunderstand what trust is, right? Trust does not mean you're the mentor. Trust does not mean you're the big brother. Trust does not imply responsibility, right? You have to think of yourself like you think of a safety deposit box. It's a tool that you put something in, and then you walk away and you never think of it again, right? It's not a mentor. It's not a reference point. It's a tool that's there that you trust to be secure. If you can be somebody else's safe deposit box, then they never have to worry about you. And the only time you come to mind is with a comfort that their stuff is safe.
Yeah, and you can tell them things that you can't tell anybody else. Because I'm assuming these other people you're trying to get these secrets from, like human nature says that we kind of want to tell somebody these secrets, right?
Right.
Biologically, that we don't want to hold them for the rest of our lives, I'm assuming?
There's a survival instinct that inclines us to share secrets with our own tribe because our tribe is supposed to protect us.
Yeah.
So we feel like we have to share our secrets with the people who are responsible for protecting us. So it makes it so that, like, this is why criminals can't keep their crime secret. Right. It's why adulterers can't keep their crime secret. It's why people who embezzle money can't keep this crime secret. It's because they feel like they have to share it because somebody else has to help offset the risk of discovery or the loss of
And they
survival.
want justification. They want, They
Validation.
want validation, 100%. So let's go into tonality. This is important for persuasion influence, whether you're in sales business, whether you're a CIA agent listening to this. So what's the most important? So when you're reading somebody, is it more important the words they say or how they say those words?
It's a great question because the words that somebody is saying are carefully crafted. They have put effort into their words, but they're not putting any effort into their nonverbal cues.
Yeah.
And nonverbal cues are anything other than words.
Yeah.
So the pace that someone is speaking is a nonverbal cue. The volume that someone is speaking is a nonverbal cue.
Yeah.
Their ums, their ers, when you see them processing through an idea, that is a nonverbal cue. So the words themselves
That's their physiology.
are
body
the
language.
last thing you can trust.
Yeah.
You have to look at the body language. You have to look at the tonality, the tempo, the pacing. That's going to tell you whether they're comfortable, whether they're being truthful, whether they're actually transparent. That's going to tell you if they're uncomfortable because you're crossing from their public life into their private life.
Yeah.
It's going to tell you when to push harder. It's going to tell you when to sit in that tension and let them get comfortable with the tension before you move forward. It's everything.
Your tonality, that's how the brain interprets the meaning behind what you're saying. That makes sense. So your prospects are interpreting your words, your questions, not by the words, but how you say those words. So that's what I always say, like, why do salespeople selling the same thing to the same prospects at the same price points using the same script, how do they get completely different results? It's not the words, it's how they say those words. It's
Right.
the tone, it's the body language.
It's the same reason that we like certain motivational speakers and we don't like other motivational speakers. Even though they're all talking about the same thing,
Yeah.
some of them use dramatic language and pauses and they bring us to the edge of our seat with excitement. Others just tell you the facts and nothing but the facts, ma'am.
Yeah.
And it's just a completely different experience,
Yeah.
right? It's,
Even though they're saying the same thing.
even though they're saying the same thing,
Yeah.
even though they're all talking about mindset and they're all talking about morning routines.
What about how does the body language affect the tone when you're reading somebody? Like to see if they're telling you the truth. What are you looking for?
So there's this idea out there that micro expressions are the key to determining if someone's telling you the truth. And what the truth is that at CIA, we don't rely on micro expressions. There is
Define micro expressions for everybody here.
so micro expressions are when you look at blink rate or when you look at someone sucking on their teeth or when you see like forehead wrinkles or eye twitches or blink, different tiny changes in the face especially.
Sure.
The only time micro expressions are reliable is when you're in an interrogation setting where you control the
Because they
environment.
can't leave.
Because they can't leave. You control the environment, so
Yeah.
they can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But as soon as that you're in a position where the environment is conducive to them leaving, you can't trust micro expressions.
Yeah, because if you're on a Zoom call, they can just click,
Yep.
move on.
If you're sitting in an office, they can just stand up and walk away.
Yeah.
So when you don't have the control of the environment, you have to rely on what we call baseline. Baseline is how you identify whether or not a person is having a large deviation from normal or whether they're in a small deviation from normal.
What do you mean by that?
So people who walk in, let's just say they're walking into a car dealership, right?
Okay.
When we walk into a car dealership, we're primed for a certain number of things. We know whether or not we are interested, how interested we are. We know how much time we have. We already know whether we hate buying cars or we love buying cars or something in between. So we have a baseline when we walk in.
Yeah.
A good salesman will see this person has a baseline. They won't start jumping into sales conversation and they won't try to make you buy a car in 20
Welcome to the
minutes.
store today. How can I help you?
Yeah, exactly.
Just looking.
That's
Pattern.
bingo.
Yeah.
What a good salesman is going to do is going to see this person is somewhere. They have a mental frame right now, but I don't know what it is. I have to learn their mental frame by observing their baseline.
Yeah.
Maybe you do that by letting them walk around for 5 minutes. Maybe you walk up to them and you have a conversation about something other than buying a car. And that's going to give you a chance to hear how fast they're speaking. Are they jittery? Are they caffeinated?
Yeah, because if they're jittery or talking fast, that implies that their nervous system is reacting and they're nervous probably because they feel like you're going to sell them something. So how do you calm their nervous system? How do you disarm them?
Right. And you won't even know unless you take a baseline. Maybe they're just a nervous person, right? Maybe they're an introvert and they are already terrified just to be out in public.
Sure.
You have no idea. So you've got to get a baseline of 20 minutes or so to see what is normal. And then once you know what normal is, you can understand how your inputs increase or decrease or don't impact what their normal is.
Okay.
That's how you can start to ferret out whether somebody is a compliant buyer or whether somebody is a resistant buyer or whether somebody just hates salespeople right out of the gates.
Sure.
Or maybe somebody's came from a sales family and they're here to test you. You don't really ever know until you get a baseline.
Yeah. And in a sales situation, human brain recognizes patterns. What pattern are they used to anytime they come into a retail store? What pattern?
Yep.
The question, welcome to the store today. How can I help you? That's a pattern they recognize, right? Because they've heard that since they were kids. And so immediately they get a knee-jerk reaction.
Yep.
Oh, just looking.
And they
Even
know
though
it's
they're
an
interested.
ingenuine, and it's an ingenuine question.
Yeah, exactly. They know it's like showing up on a sales call like, how's your day going? They know you're generally not interested in how your day's going. So instantly the trust goes down in you because they know you're trying to build rapport.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of people believe building rapport is asking those type of surface level questions. Why is it not?
Rapport, it's
Like
funny.
trust building.
Yes, CIA uses the word rapport.
Okay.
And we use rapport specifically to explain a positive interaction with another person. That's what rapport is. It's not just an interaction. It's not a neutral interaction. It's a positive interaction. So it actually takes effort to build rapport. And the whole reason that you build rapport is because from that rapport, you are gaining something that we call social capital. Social capital is just like real money, just like real capital, only it's used in social situations. So imagine you go to work and you get a paycheck and then you put that paycheck in your bank. You go to have a meeting with somebody, you build rapport and you put that social capital in the bank. And you start building up this social capital because at some point in time you have to spend the rapport, the capital that you've built. You have to ask them a hard question.
Sure.
You have to make them uncomfortable. You have to put some pressure on them to get them to move off of the X that they're on.
Yeah.
That's called spending your social capital.
Okay.
The thing is, as long as you have more capital in the bank and you're never outspent, they have essentially a social obligation to stay in place. They can't leave.
They comply.
They comply.
That makes sense. Okay. So I want to go, I heard you talk about this on a couple podcasts. You talk a lot about perception versus perspective. What does that mean for everybody watching, listening to us?
So all human beings live in a world of their own perception. We are the star of our show, right? Everything happening is happening to you. Where you came from, where you're going, what you're thinking about, whether you're hungry, whether you have to go to the bathroom, you're the star of the show. It's your perception of the world around you. Well, guess what? The world is much bigger than you.
Yeah.
And when it comes to a social interaction with another person, guess what they're also doing from wherever they're sitting? Living in their own perception.
World, yeah.
Right? Where they're coming from, where they're going to, how their gut feels, right? They're worried about whether or not you can smell their bad breath.
Yeah.
We all live in our own perception. Well, the problem is if we live in our own perception, at all points we're competing with each other instead of finding commonalities. Because my perception is right, your perception is wrong. My perception is better, your perception is worse. And we're all thinking that all the time. Perspective means that you stop focusing on the subjective beliefs of your experience, and you start trying to observe the objective realities of your target.
So you're putting yourself in their shoes. How do they think?
And you're not putting yourself in their shoes with assumptions. You're putting yourself in their shoes by looking for objective, measurable facts, right? That person looks like they're about 6'3". What must their knees feel like? If they're 55 and 6'3", it feels very different on their body than me being 45 and 5'11", right? They're carrying extra weight. What must that feel like? I can see that they smell like coffee. They must have had coffee this morning. Are they crashing right now? Are they buzzing right now? Are they, right? Whatever. You're
almost trying to emotionally connect before you talk to them, possibly, or while you're talking to them. You're putting yourself in their shoes, but you're genuinely trying to understand their inner self, really.
Yeah, you're trying to understand their experience because when they start to share information with you, it's just information unless you can put it into a frame that is their experience. Somebody who says I was up at 4 a.m. who's super fit, that means something different than somebody who's up at 4 a.m. and they're 60 pounds overweight. You can start to imagine how different the experience must be. So you can actually frame it and understand it better, which allows you to ask a better follow-up question. It allows you to create a better personal connection.
It puts you in an emotional state. Like it puts you in an emotional state to be able to connect with them. That's the number one way to influence, is to master the emotional connection where that other human being, whether you're in the CIA or in sales or whatever, feels like you understand them, their needs, their desires, their wants, even their fears, and do that without judging them.
And the magic is they're not doing it to you.
Yeah.
Because they've never heard this conversation. They've never gone through the practice. So every time you try to objectively perceive somebody else's existence, it makes them subconsciously feel good. It makes them feel interesting. It makes them feel relevant. It makes them feel heard. It makes them feel seen.
So what's releasing in their brain? We're talking about that's releasing dopamine. What are they releasing there? Because there's a chemical that's being released in their brain that's causing them to feel these feelings.
Correct. Yeah, all those feel-good chemicals. So they're getting their dopamine fix. You're actively,
that's going to let their guard down because it calms their nervous system.
Actively reducing their cortisol levels, which is also further reducing their resistance.
Yeah.
You're building this almost like a external reliance on what your actions are to feed their good feeling.
Yeah.
And you want that because at the end of the day or at the end of the conversation, you're going to walk away.
Yeah.
And when you walk away, you want to take their dopamine hit with you. So then when they go wherever they're going, they can't help but wonder, like, when am I going to see that guy again?
Yeah.
When are we going to have another good conversation again?
It's like, it's even if in the dating world as well, like you leave and they don't know if you necessarily like them, don't like them. It's kind of a mystery. And that's why it causes so much curiosity, where they want more of that. 100%.
Right. We talk about persuasion and influence, and the lay world kind of talks about them as if they're the same thing, but they're not the same thing.
Yeah. What are the difference?
At CIA, we define persuasion and influence as two different elements of the same outcome. Persuasion is only what happens when you're physically with a person.
Okay.
Right? Physically with them in real time, physically with them on a webinar, physically with them on the phone.
You're either persuading them or you're getting them to persuade themselves. That makes sense.
Because you have to be engaging them in real time.
Yeah.
Because persuasion is intrinsically tied to emotions.
Yeah.
And you can only really observe, trigger, and trip emotions in real time.
Yeah.
So when somebody's with you, your only option is persuasion.
Yeah.
When you are out of the picture and they're thinking about what you said, you're influencing them.
So that's like Steve Jobs. Everybody still loves Steve Jobs. He's a legend because he influenced. He's not even here, but you still think about him because of the influence.
Correct.
Or like Tom Brady's not really playing football anymore, but he still influences your, like, wow, he's the greatest of all time because of the influence.
Exactly. And that influence is really powerful because it has a long tail. And you are literally amplifying the success of your persuasive moments during that long tail of influence. So you talk to someone on Monday, you don't talk to them on Tuesday. If you were good at persuading them on Monday, the emotions that you triggered are coming back up again on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And then you talk to them on Wednesday. And from their perspective, you've been part of their life for 3 days.
Yeah.
But in reality, you've been part of their life for 2 hours.
Yeah, it's just the influence. Does that make sense? So anybody ever, like, you're in a type of sales situation, you could be selling to even a consumer, you could be selling to a business, and you have this first call, discovery call, whatever, then you have to book this second call. Well, why do a lot of those people not show up to that second call? Because you haven't mastered it, how to influence them, where they're thinking about that conversation all the way up to that call. Why do like top salespeople get most people to show up? Because of the influence. So what he's saying here is they're still thinking about that conversation 2, 3, 4 days later because you've influenced them. You guys getting this? Yeah, good stuff. Here, good. We geek. Isn't this fun for you guys, psychology people? I love salespeople. All right. So we talk a lot about, human beings make decisions emotionally. That's in our limbic system, emotional part of your brain, reacts before the neocortex that justifies that. How do you get them to stay in that emotional side of their brain so you can kind of control that emotional state so they don't really go over to that logical side where they try to start to analyze everything?
We have a tool at CIA that we call feeling questions. Feeling questions are literally questions that include an element of emotions. How did you feel when? Take me back to the day that. What do you remember about whatever this thing is, right? You're trying to get the target to use their own words, their own vocabulary that is tied to their emotions. You want them to say things like, I felt frustrated, I felt happy, I was good, I was bad. You want to see physical and nonverbal cues that are signs of emotion. You want to see furrowed eyebrows, you want to see clenched teeth, you want to see sucked lips.
Because now you can tell they bought into that emotion.
And now
rather
you know
than
that
if they're just straight faced, they're just telling you surface level stuff.
Exactly. And you know that you're in the emotional brain. It really is like a light switch, because the emotional brain always works faster than the rational brain.
Yeah.
Right? Your right brain is way faster than your left brain. So
survival, survival part of the brain. You're reacting. I hear a tiger in the woods.
It's sympathetic.
Yeah.
Exactly. So once you get them, once you have the first tripwire, everything after that, they're going to stay there. The only way they get out of there is if you slow down or you stop or you pause or you break momentum enough that their rational brain can catch up, and then they come back into their rational thought process.
That's so true.
So you have to get them there, keep them there, and look for those verbal and nonverbal cues that they're talking and thinking emotionally.
Are you guys trained tonality and how to influence by tonality?
Absolutely.
What do you train with that? It's a big thing that we do.
Yeah. So when it comes to the tones that you're using in your speech, you've got to understand that the way you say something, how you say something, is oftentimes more powerful than what you say.
Sure.
So if you raise your voice, if you speed up, if you use complex words, or if you use simple words, right? The tone that you take in the conversation is going to trigger some kind of emotional response. It might be defensive, it might be sadness, it might be anger, it might be joy, right? But the tone that you deliver is a primer for the emotion you want them to demonstrate. So if you want someone to get frustrated, you're going to talk in a frustrated way.
Yeah.
You're going to use your tonality
Tripping that emotion.
because you know it's going to instigate them on the right side of their brain to show the emotion you want them to show. And likewise, if you want them to feel really reflective and sympathetic and sad, you're going to talk in a certain way.
More concerned tone that shows empathy.
That invites
what actually
them
happened?
to feel the same way.
Yeah. I love that. Everybody picking up what he's putting down there? I love that. Okay, so what are your thoughts about the way politicians communicate? We were talking about a little bit about that. What are your thoughts about how they communicate?
Somehow politicians have not learned anything from the business world.
Right, yeah.
because there's, I think you said it great backstage, right? If a politician could learn how to speak like a salesperson, they wouldn't win by margins of 2 or 3%. They'd win by margins of 20%.
If they knew how to, if they knew how to influence. I think most salespeople, unless they've been trained, most salespeople have not really been trained the right way. Most salespeople, I believe, kind of actually communicate like most politicians. That's why they don't make a lot of sales. But the very best, get the guard down, open them up, influence, right? Politicians just don't really go through much of that training. Maybe the CIA should do that a little bit. I don't know.
I mean, it would be great if the two could actually collide, but we'll see. The two different branches of government.